Question number 27. Solve for x. 2x squared plus 4x minus 16 equal to 0. So just remember, the only way you can solve equations when there's an exponent like this and all those terms is if it's equal to 0. So they already made it sort of a little easy for us. So there's a few ways we can solve it. We can solve using quadratic formula, which is on your reference sheet. We can solve using complete the square. Or we can try to factor. I'm going to try to factor. So if you remember, the way we have to first start our factoring process is look to see if there's a GCF. So I'm going to write down 2x squared plus 4x minus 16 equal to 0. And I'm going to ask myself, is there a term or a number or an expression or whatever that goes into all three terms? If I look, the smallest number is a 2. So the largest possible number that can go into each is 2. So I'm going to ask myself, does 2 go into 2? Yes, it does. Does 2 go into 4? Yep. And does 2 go into 16? It does. So I'm going to factor out a 2. So let's factor out a 2, factor out a 2, factor out a 2. And now remember, you rewrite your GCF, and then we rewrite our leftovers. So I'm going to write down x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now, if you remember, when we have this type of factoring, we want to add up to our middle number and multiply to our last. So I'm going to write down my diamond and put negative 8 up top and 2 downstairs. I'm now going to go to my calculator and write down y equals 8 divide x to list out my factor pairs of 8. So let's see what my factor pairs are. So 8 divide x, second graph. I'm going to start at 0. At 0, I get error. At 1, I get 8. 2, I get 4. And I'm pretty sure that's it because 3 does not go into 8. So now I have to figure out which of those pairs is going to work. I think it's going to be the 2 and the 4. So let's put the 2 and the 4 back in. 2 times 4 is positive 8. I want a negative, so one of those is going to be negative. So I'm going to make the 2 negative just to see what happens. Negative 2 times 4, negative 8, that works. Negative 2 plus 4, that's a positive 2, that works. So my factors are going to be 2 times x minus 2 times x plus 4. And then I'm going to do equal to 0. Now we're going to t-time it and set each of our factors equal to 0. I'm going to do 2 equal to 0, x minus 2 equal to 0, and then x plus 4 equal to 0. Now if you look at the first equation, 2 cannot be equal to 0, so that's not possible. That's a no solution. In the second equation, I'm going to add 2 to both sides of my equation. So I get x equals 2. And then the last one, I'm going to subtract 4, so I get x is equal to negative 4. Now, pretend you're not someone who likes factoring. You can use quadratic formula. So if we look here, I did already solve it. I'm not going to redo it. But you identify your a, b's, and c's. So in this case, remember, the a value is the number attached to x squared, the b is the number attached to x, and the c is your constant. So in this situation, a is 2, b is 4, and c is negative 16. Now, I like to do quadratic formula where I basically find out what negative b is, b squared minus 4ac, and 2a is. So I evaluate those separately. So when I do negative b, I get negative 4. When I do b squared minus 4ac, I get 144. And when I do 2a, I get 4. I then don't re-plug in. I just substitute those values in. So I get negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 144 all over 4. We should know that 144 is a perfect square. That simplifies to 12. And then I just separate my fractions with my plus or minus. And then I alpha y equals enter it, and I get 2 and negative 4, which is the exact same solution as this. You will get full credit for either of those responses.